I never thought I'd be writing my life out on the internet, but here I am. My name is John, and I've been married to my wife, Emily, for over 20 years. We have 2 grown children who have moved out, leaving us alone in our empty nest. I suppose you could say we're trying to rekindle our relationship, though it's been a bumpy road. I'm a reserved and independent man, which has always been a part of who I am. Emily, on the other hand, has often felt neglected due to my non-demonstrative nature and demanding job. This is the story of how I discovered my wife's infidelity and the journey that followed. 7 years ago, our marriage hit a rough patch. Emily confessed to having developed feelings for a man she met online. She cited my emotional unavailability as the reason for her wandering heart. I was devastated, but she assured me that it was only an emotional affair and that she had chosen to stay with me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that our love was strong enough to overcome this hurdle. So I took her word for it and tried to move on. The truth, however, was only partially revealed. Emily admitted to an emotional affair, but didn't disclose the full extent of her involvement. I never probed deeper, perhaps out of fear of what I might find. I convinced myself that if she chose to stay, there was hope for us. Fast forward to the present day. Emily was out of town on an extended trip for work. During one of our phone calls, she dropped a bombshell that shook me to my core. She revealed that she had slept with the man during a business trip 7 years ago. This revelation hit me like a freight train. I had believed we had moved past the infidelity, but it turned out that I had been living a lie. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind raced with a million thoughts, none of them making any sense. Despite the betrayal, I found it increasingly difficult to live with my decision to try and move past it. Forgiving Emily was one thing, forgetting was another. I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. I battled my instincts and emotions, wavering between staying and the urge to end the marriage. I acknowledged my own faults, my emotional unavailability, and my neglect, but that didn't make the pain any less real. In my search for clarity, I reached out to friends and online communities for advice. I hoped to find some support, some insight that would help me navigate this mess. The responses were varied. Some urged me to leave, while others encouraged me to work things out. None of it made my decision any easier. I had planned to wait until Emily returned home to discuss everything, but things took an unexpected turn. During another phone call, we ended up having a deep and serious conversation about her affair. Emily provided more context, explaining how my indifferent behavior and a hurtful comment led her to seek comfort elsewhere. She admitted that she felt neglected and unloved, and in a moment of weakness, she made a terrible mistake. She mentioned reading an article suggesting that husbands are happier without wives who cheat, which made me realize how much I wanted to stay with her. Despite everything, I loved her and wanted to make our marriage work. But this time, there would be no forgiveness. After that conversation, I made a decision to focus on myself and my own well-being. Emily wanted to continue our marriage, but I couldn't get past the betrayal. I reassured her that I would continue to be there for our children and would remain civil, but I could no longer trust her or see her in the same light. I decided to start focusing on self-improvement, starting with regular gym visits to cope with stress and maintain my well-being. I didn't want to fall into the same patterns that had led to our problems in the first place. With both of us committed to finding our own paths forward, I looked forward to rebuilding my life on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. I understood that the journey wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to put in the effort to avoid falling into darkness again. Our home felt different now, quieter with the kids gone, but it was also a place where I could rebuild and grow independently. As I reflect on our journey, I realized that trust is not something that can be easily rebuilt once broken. I needed to confront my own shortcomings and work on personal growth, but that didn't mean I had to forgive or forget what had happened. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of Emily's betrayal began to press harder on my chest. I had thought that by deciding to distance myself, the pain would start to diminish, but it seemed to grow instead. Every time I looked at her, I saw the ghost of her affair. Every time she touched me, I wondered if she had touched him the same way. One night, after another sleepless bout, I found myself in front of my computer, typing out my feelings on a support forum. The anonymity gave me a sense of freedom. I poured my heart out, detailing every emotion, every doubt, every fear. The responses were varied, but one stood out. Healing takes time. It's okay to not be okay. One evening, Emily and I sat down to watch a movie. It was a simple thing, something we used to do often before everything fell apart. As the film played, I found myself lost in thought. I realized that while I had been focusing on my pain, I had neglected to understand hers. Emily had felt alone and unloved, and while her actions were inexcusable, they were also a cry for help. I decided to approach our situation with a new perspective. I needed to understand her pain, just as she needed to understand mine. We started having more conversations about our feelings, our fears, and our hopes for the future. It wasn't easy, and sometimes it felt like we were going in circles, but we were talking, and that was a start. Emily suggested that we start doing things together again, activities that we used to enjoy. We started with small things, like cooking dinner together or taking evening walks. These moments, though seemingly trivial, began to rebuild a sense of closeness between us. We also started writing letters to each other. It was Emily's idea, a way to express our feelings without the immediate pressure of a conversation. In these letters, we were able to be more honest, more vulnerable. It was through these letters that I began to see Emily not as the woman who betrayed me, but as the woman I fell in love with so many years ago. One weekend, Emily suggested we go away for a few days, just the two of us. I was hesitant at first, but I agreed. We chose a small cabin in the mountains, a place where we could disconnect from the world and focus on each other. The trip was a turning point. Away from the distractions of daily life, we were able to talk openly and honestly. We laughed, we cried, we reminisced about the good times and acknowledged the bad. It was during this trip that I realized I still loved Emily deeply, and despite everything, I wanted to make our marriage work. Returning home, we decided it was time to face our past head-on. We revisited the moments that led to Emily's affair, the things I had said and done, and the ways she had felt neglected. It was painful, but it was necessary. We couldn't move forward without addressing the wounds of the past. Emily apologized again, and this time I could see the sincerity in her eyes. She had been carrying her own burden of guilt and shame, and it was tearing her apart. I realized that for us to heal, we both needed to acknowledge the damage, but not necessarily forgive or forget it. Rebuilding trust was the hardest part. It required a level of vulnerability that neither of us was used to. We had to be completely open with each other, sharing our thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. We set boundaries and made promises to each other. We agreed to always communicate, no matter how difficult the conversation might be. We also agreed to spend more quality time together, to prioritize our relationship above all else. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I doubted whether we could make it work. But every time I felt those doubts creeping in, I reminded myself of why I was doing this because I loved Emily and believed in our marriage. As the months passed, we started finding joy in our relationship again. We laughed more, we shared more, and we loved more. It was like rediscovering each other all over again. We celebrated the small victories, like a week without an argument, or a heartfelt conversation that brought us closer together. We also started new traditions. Every Sunday, we would go for a hike and have a picnic. It became our special time, a way to reconnect and remind ourselves of the love that brought us together. One day, Emily surprised me with a small gift, a photo album filled with pictures from our past. As we flipped through the pages, we were reminded of all the beautiful moments we had shared. It was a poignant reminder of why we were fighting so hard to save our marriage. We decided to start a new album, one that would document our journey of healing and growth. Each picture represented a step forward, a new beginning. Our anniversary that year was different. Instead of a lavish celebration, we opted for a quiet evening at home. We cooked dinner together, reminisced about our journey, and talked about our hopes for the future. It was a simple, yet profound celebration. We had come a long way, and while we still had a long way to go, we were committed to making it work. We had rediscovered our love for each other, and that was worth celebrating. As I sit here writing this, I realize that our journey is far from over. We still have challenges to face and obstacles to overcome, but we are stronger now, more resilient. We have learned to communicate, to understand, and to support each other. Emily and I have made a promise to each other to never stop trying, to never stop loving, and to never stop believing in our marriage. It won't be easy, and there will be times when we stumble, but we are committed to this journey together. Just when I thought we were finally finding our rhythm, life threw us another curveball. Emily lost her job. It was sudden and unexpected, and it hit her hard. She felt like she had failed, like she was bringing more problems into our already fragile marriage. I tried to be there for her, to support her as best as I could, but the stress took its toll on both of us. We found ourselves arguing more, our old wounds reopening. It was a tough time, but we knew we had to stick together. With Emily out of work, we decided it was a good opportunity for her to pursue her passion. She had always loved painting, but had never had the time to fully dedicate herself to it. So with some encouragement, she turned our spare room into a makeshift studio. Watching Emily paint was like seeing a different side of her. She was passionate, focused, and happy. It reminded me of the woman I fell in love with. And it also gave me the push I needed to pursue my own hobbies. I took up woodworking, something I had always been interested in but never had the time for. It was therapeutic, giving me a sense of accomplishment and peace. These new pursuits helped us reconnect on a different level, bringing a new dimension to our relationship. We realized the importance of having a support system. While we leaned on each other, we also reached out to friends and family. Emily joined a local art group, finding solace and camaraderie with others who shared her passion. I reconnected with old friends, finding comfort in their support and advice. Our support systems became an integral part of our healing process. They provided us with perspectives we hadn't considered and helped us navigate the rough patches. We learned that it's okay to ask for help, that we don't have to go through everything alone. One evening, as we were sitting in our backyard, Emily turned to me with tears in her eyes. She apologized again for the pain she had caused and thanked me for sticking by her. It was a heartfelt moment, one that solidified my decision to stay, but on my own terms. I realized then that letting go of anger and resentment was not about forgiveness, but about moving forward without the burden of the past dragging us down. I had to let go of the past, to truly move forward, to rebuild my life without being anchored by the hurt. Emily's painting business started to take off, which was a relief given our financial situation. Watching her succeed was bittersweet. On one hand, I was genuinely happy for her. On the other, I felt a pang of jealousy and inadequacy. She seemed to have found a new purpose, while I was still grappling with the same old issues. It was around this time that I started diving deeper into my woodworking hobby. It became more than just a pastime. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in the rhythm of creating something tangible. The smell of fresh wood, the sound of saws and sanders, the feel of a smooth finish under my fingertips, it was all therapeutic. And slowly, I began to see improvements in my craft. I started making furniture, some pieces for our home and others for friends who admired my work. Emily noticed my dedication and suggested I try selling my pieces online. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't think my work was good enough to sell, but she was insistent. "You've got talent, John. People will appreciate your craftsmanship," she said. So I took the plunge and set up an online store. To my surprise, my furniture started to sell. Orders trickled in, and I found myself busier than ever. It was gratifying to see something I created being appreciated by others, and it gave me a renewed sense of purpose. It was during one of these busy periods that Emily and I had another deep conversation. It was late at night, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of settling wood. She talked about how her affair had been a wake-up call for her, how she realized that she had been looking for something outside of our marriage that she should have been seeking within it. I listened, my hands busy with a small piece of wood I was sanding smooth. I didn't respond immediately. There was a lot to unpack in her words, a lot of emotions to sort through. But one thing was clear, she was genuinely remorseful and wanted to make things right. I told her that while I couldn't forget what happened, I was willing to try and move forward for the sake of our family. But I also made it clear that things would never be the same. There would always be a scar, a reminder of the betrayal, and that was something she would have to accept. Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand, John, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work," she said. We continued to live together, but it was more like coexisting than being truly together. The intimacy we once shared was gone, replaced by a cautious companionship. We were like two people navigating a minefield, careful not to set off any explosions. I threw myself into my work, both at my job and in my workshop. The orders for my furniture increased, and I found myself spending more and more time in my workshop. It was a welcome distraction, a way to channel my frustrations into something productive. Emily continued with her painting, and her business flourished. She started getting commissions, and her artwork was being featured in local galleries. She seemed happy, fulfilled, and for that, I was glad. But there was still a part of me that couldn't fully embrace her success. It was a constant reminder of how our paths had diverged. One day, while working on a particularly challenging piece, I received a call from an old friend, Mark. We hadn't spoken in years, but he had heard about my furniture business and wanted to catch up. Mark had always been someone I could talk to, someone who understood me. We met for a drink that evening, and it felt good to reconnect. As we talked, I found myself opening up about everything that had happened. Mark listened patiently, offering his support and advice. "You need to find a way to move on, John," he said. "Whether it's with Emily or without her, you need to figure out what's best for you." His words stuck with me. I realized that I had been so focused on the betrayal in the past that I hadn't considered my own future. I needed to make a decision, not just for Emily and our family, but for myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Mark had said. I needed to take control of my life, to stop letting the past dictate my present. The next morning, I sat down with Emily and told her we needed to talk. We discussed our future, our goals, and what we both wanted out of life. It was a difficult conversation, but it was also necessary. We came to a mutual decision to separate. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one for both of us. We agreed to co-parent our children and to remain civil for their sake. The day I moved out of our home was one of the hardest days of my life. I packed my belongings, loaded them into my car, and drove away, leaving behind 2 decades of memories. I found a small apartment not too far from our old home and began to rebuild my life. Living alone was a new experience. The silence was deafening at first, but I gradually grew accustomed to it. I set up a small workshop in my garage and continued working on my furniture. My business grew, and I found a sense of fulfillment in my work. I also started going out more, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. It was during one of these outings that I met Sarah. She was different from Emily in so many ways, warm, open, and incredibly understanding. We started seeing each other, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of happiness. Sarah knew about my past, about Emily's betrayal, and she was supportive and patient. She didn't push me to move faster than I was ready, and I appreciated that more than she could know. We took things slow, building our relationship on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. As time went on, I found myself thinking less and less about Emily. The pain of the betrayal still lingered, but it was no longer the defining feature of my life. I was moving forward, building a new life for myself. Emily and I remained in contact, mostly for the sake of our children. We were civil, even friendly at times, but the intimacy we once shared was gone. She had her life, and I had mine. One day, while working on a new project in my workshop, I received a call from Emily. She sounded upset, and I could tell something was wrong. "John, can we talk?" she asked. I agreed, and we met at a local cafe. Emily told me she had been struggling with guilt and regret. She had been seeing a therapist and working through her issues, and she wanted to apologize once again for everything that had happened. I listened, but this time, I didn't feel the same anger and hurt. I realized that I had truly moved on. Emily and I talked for a long time that day, and by the end of our conversation, we had reached a new understanding. We weren't the same people we had been, and our relationship had changed, but we could still be there for each other in a different way. I left the cafe that day with a sense of closure. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had finally let go of the past, and I was ready to fully embrace my future with Sarah. As the years went by, my relationship with Sarah deepened. We moved in together, and I felt a sense of peace and happiness that I hadn't felt in a long time. My furniture business continued to thrive, and I even started teaching woodworking classes at a local community center. Life had a way of coming full circle. I had gone through the darkest period of my life, but I had come out stronger on the other side. Emily and I remained amicable, co-parenting our children and supporting each other's endeavors. She continued to find success with her painting, and I was genuinely happy for her. One evening, as Sarah and I sat on our porch watching the sunset, I reflected on everything that had happened. It had been a long and difficult journey, but I had learned so much about myself and what I wanted out of life. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't always necessary, that sometimes moving on was the best option. I had learned that it was okay to let go of the past and to build a new future. Most importantly, I had learned that I was capable of finding happiness again. Sarah squeezed my hand, and I looked at her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had been my rock, my support, and my partner in every sense of the word. With her by my side, I knew I could face whatever the future held. This is my story, a story of betrayal, pain, and ultimately, redemption. It's a story of letting go and finding the strength to move forward. And it's a story of love, not just the romantic kind, but the love we must have for ourselves in order to heal and grow. Looking back, I can see how far I've come. The journey wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to give up, but I didn't. I found the strength to keep going, to rebuild my life and find happiness again. And for that, I am grateful. This is my story, and while it's still being written, I know that the future is bright. I have a new life, a new love, and a new sense of purpose. And I am ready to embrace whatever comes next, with an open heart and an unbreakable spirit. The separation from Emily marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. It was strange at first, waking up in a different bed, in a different house, without the familiar sounds and routines of our old home. But as time passed, I began to appreciate the solitude. It gave me the space I needed to reflect, to heal, and to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. My woodworking business continued to grow, and I took on more challenging projects. The satisfaction I got from creating something beautiful with my own hands was unparalleled. It was my therapy, my way of coping with the residual pain and anger from the betrayal. Emily and I maintained a cordial relationship for the sake of our children. We attended their events together, celebrated their milestones, and made sure they knew they were loved and supported by both of us. But the emotional distance between us remained. There were no more deep conversations, no more attempts to rebuild what had been broken. We had both accepted that our marriage was over, and we were moving on in our own ways. My relationship with Sarah continued to blossom. She was my anchor, the steady presence that kept me grounded. She understood my need for space, and never pressured me to move faster than I was ready. Our relationship was built on mutual respect and understanding, and it grew stronger with each passing day. We found joy in the simple things, cooking dinner together, taking long walks, and spending quiet evenings at home. Sarah's warmth and kindness were a balm to my wounded heart, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I never had with Emily. One day, while working on a custom furniture piece, I received a message from an old college friend, Lisa. She had heard about my woodworking business and wanted to commission a piece for her new home. We hadn't spoken in years, but it was great to reconnect. Lisa's commission turned out to be a significant project, a large dining table made from reclaimed wood. It was a challenge, but one that I relished. As I worked on the table, I found myself thinking about the past, about the choices I had made, and the path that had led me to where I was now. The table turned out beautifully, and Lisa was thrilled with the result. She posted pictures of it online, and soon I was getting inquiries from others who wanted similar pieces. My business was booming, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment and pride. Meanwhile, Sarah and I decided to take a trip together. We both needed a break from our routines, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to spend some quality time together. We chose a quiet cabin by a lake, far away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. The trip was magical. We spent our days hiking, fishing, and exploring the area. In the evenings, we sat by the fire, talking and laughing, sharing stories and dreams. It was during this trip that I realized how deeply I had fallen in love with Sarah. She was my partner, my confidant, and my best friend. I couldn't imagine my life without her. When we returned from our trip, I knew it was time to take the next step in our relationship. I wanted to build a future with Sarah, to create new memories and share our lives together. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, I took her hand in mine and told her how much she meant to me. Sarah, you have been my rock, my support, and my love. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me? Her eyes filled with tears and she nodded, a smile spreading across her face. Yes, John. Yes, I will. Our engagement was a joyous occasion, and we began planning our future together. We decided to keep things simple, focusing on what truly mattered: our love and commitment to each other. We planned a small wedding, surrounded by close friends and family. The day of our wedding was perfect. The sun was shining, the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, and the sound of laughter and music filled the air. As I stood at the altar, watching Sarah walk down the aisle, I felt a sense of peace and happiness that I hadn't felt in a long time. This was the beginning of a new chapter, a new life filled with love and promise. Emily attended the wedding, and it was a bittersweet moment. We had shared so much together, and while our marriage had ended, we had both found our own paths forward. She was genuinely happy for me, and I appreciated her support. Our children were thrilled to see their parents happy and moving on with their lives. They had been through so much, and it was important to us that they knew they were loved and supported by both of us, no matter what. Sarah and I settled into our new life together, creating a home filled with love, laughter, and warmth. We continued to pursue our passions: her love for gardening and my woodworking. We supported each other's dreams and found joy in the everyday moments. Next story, story 2. In 2016, I moved to a different country to marry the love of my life. I dropped everything: friends, family, career. I was willing to start over for her, and it was perfect in the beginning. Almost exactly 1 year ago now, we started having problems. I still couldn't work or drive because of immigration bureaucracy, and was very lonely. My wife got tired of me and started to hang out with a friend that didn't like me, and I wasn't allowed to go with. Many times my wife wouldn't even come back home to sleep. And in the middle of it all, I found out she was cheating with a guy from work. Her friend knew about it and encouraged it. I told her family that I couldn't take it anymore, and told my wife that I was leaving. My wife then tried to kill herself. I stopped her, she apologized, promised to change, and I stayed. But it wouldn't last long. She put up a face for a while, but later I found out that she would text her friend and her lover even around that time, saying that she wished that I would just leave. Her family didn't want to speak to her after they learned she cheated, but I convinced them to take her back. A couple of months later, I found out that she was still cheating. I wanted to leave her, but I couldn't go back to my home country. It had been 1 year, and I had turned down the job offer I had after graduating from college. I had my family and friends, but no patrimony. I would go back to live with my parents, so I asked her family for help, and I would go into the military so I could have a chance to stay without her. But my wife came back home crying and convinced me to give her another chance, and I did. I'm not proud of it, but I love her very, very much. I didn't want it to lose her. I convinced her family once again to take her back, and I finally started working. I had 2 jobs. I was making more money than my wife, and I thought everything would be all right. I was also accepted into 2 graduate schools, and I was so happy. I thought she would be proud, because she said she cheated because she didn't feel like she had a husband since I couldn't work and provide. But suddenly she changed. She started to mock my jobs and said that I wasn't going to have a job with status anytime soon and that it bothered her. Then one night, I came home after working all day and my wife didn't. She spent the night out without telling me. She was cheating again, and this time she managed to convince her family that she wasn't cheating and that I was abusing her, a lie. So everyone turned their backs on me, and I was left alone in a different country, still living with my wife, but she would barely come home, and her family would tell me that I should just let her do it, because she wasn't cheating, and I was paranoid. I thought that my life would be ruined if I came back to my native country, so I just started working harder and making more money. But my wife wasn't happy with only cheating. She wanted me gone, so she threatened me, saying she would get me deported. One night she came home with a random guy and almost got me into a fight, so I decided that I had no choice but to leave, and I did. She wouldn't leave me alone until I scheduled my flight, but at the last minute she regretted everything and asked me to stay. It was the 3rd time I had quit both my jobs and I was scared, so I left. And I came to my native country, to nothing. No job, no income, living with my parents. My wife kept saying she would fix everything and come live with me. I said I would give her a chance and started making arrangements to have her here. Suddenly she gave up and wanted me to go back. I also said okay, but had to change all my plans again. And finally, after I had done everything on my end to go back, when it was her turn to act, she told me she wanted a divorce. She accused me of abandoning her, even though I tried my best to stay there. She said I'm possessive because I didn't want her to hang out with the guy she cheated on me with and his friends. And I found strong evidence that she is still cheating with her ex-boyfriend this time, a guy that she had accused of beating her and raping her. Now this is my situation. I'm stuck in my native country in an economic crisis. I have a good degree, but I haven't studied in 2 years because I left everything to get married. I have a green card, but my wife has it, and I'm not sure I can use it. I developed anxiety and depression after all of this. I am devastated. I really love that woman. I had good jobs. I had been accepted into 2 graduate schools, and now I have nothing. She destroyed my life. I didn't do anything wrong, and still I'm the one paying for everything. My wife kept our pets, even though she barely takes care of them, and I miss them a lot. Sorry for the long post. I needed to vent. I have been keeping everything to myself for a while, hoping that she would change, but I can't take it anymore. I posted this on another subreddit earlier, but was advised to post here instead.